Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone, and good evening for those who are dialing in from far away. So this panel is really going to focus on like the broader question around DAOs or decentralized autonomous organizations. And before going too deep, I would like everyone to maybe do like a very quick introduction, starting with Joni.
Thank you for having me. Joni Pirovich, joining you from Australia. I'm a Web3 specialist lawyer, having practiced in the space for the last 6 or 7 years now. And along with giving the legal advice, it's necessary to also contribute to the policy development, as we all know. So have been involved in a lot of policy submissions in Australia and the UK and at the OECD level.
Please go ahead on the...
Hello, then I will follow up. So I will continue. My name is Manuel. I'm here from Frankfurt, Germany, and I'm joining as contributor from the Capneo DAO, which is kind of real estate DAO combining real assets with governance of DAO.
Right, and I'm Joachim Schwerin from the Commission, DG Grow. I'm working in the unit that deals with digital transformation of industry, and I'm responsible for developing the token economy for our industrial ecosystems and small and medium-sized enterprises. And I'm also responsible for digital education in the field of blockchain.
And my name is Balazs. I'm the founder of kycDAO, as well as somewhat of the moderator of today's session, but we try to make it more decentralized, so I will also involve myself in the conversation. Yes. And basically, I think like there is the big question of what is a DAO? And we'll start off like what's my opinion, where it starts, and then we can like start to get into and get lost in the conversation. So I think it's a very complex question, as like there was DAO in 2017 that a big chunk of Ethereum's funds got logged into it. That was like really one of the first official DAOs. I think today we have like a more bigger variety of like what's named as a DAO, whether is a DAO or not. I think it's a big discussion. But for me, something that like have a transparent governance system is something that can be considered as a DAO, as it has the ability to like represent decision making and involvement of participants. Whether this is fair and square, I think we can get lost. I would be just like very curious if someone doesn't fully agree with me or have this term like more broader.
Well, I think if I look up the existing definitions on DAOs, and of course people can't agree, first sentence is mostly internet native. And of course, yes, we have the definitions like internet native, blockchain based, collectives, common objective, etc., smart contracts, all of that is fine. I think we shouldn't forget that there have been a lot of DAO-like structures actually in human history 200, 300, 400 years ago already. I mean, the idea of starting directly when looking into governance and organization with the first sentence, internet native, is a bit misleading, because what we are actually discussing in DAOs goes so deep that it brings us much back into what society has already discussed and also decided upon in some parts of the world, and that's very exciting, long time ago. Now everything is of course seen with the internet, with the blockchain, etc., and it adds a huge value, and we will discuss that. But I think a big part for me of the DAO discussion is sort of philosophical discussion of what do we actually want to achieve in this space, and this is not primarily ruled by the business model, but this is really ruled by the decentralized aspects of how human beings work together in collectives.
Everyone is nodding.
That's normally my role, so I say something and then all fall silent because it is so strange, but it's your role to activate them. Huh?
I know for a fact. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, we can also dig deeper in some kind of definitions and stuff. But so also, for instance, I think as far as I know, So Professor Isabel Welpe from the TU Munich will also publish something soon on the taxonomies of DAOs. And they will dig a bit deeper. So what is really a DAO? But I think for the conversation or for the discussion, I would like to distinguish, let's say, two things of DAOs. So for two definitions. So we have the decentralized DAOs. They are completely, let's say, in the Web3 world, and they are working very well in the truly, let's say, digitized way, right? And if they only interact with digital things or digital processes and other DAOs, then it works quite well. And on the other hand, we have a kind of legal compliant DAOs. They are able to make contracts, they building on a legal entity structure, which is similar to the DAO, but in the truth, it is more a kind of digitizing governance of a legal entity, right? It is not a real DAO itself, right? Not really decentralized. But these two types of DAO, we from Capneo try to combine, because we experience every time a real or a truly decentralized DAO want to interact with the real economy, then we have some problems in terms of what is about liability, what is about the treasury management, what is about contracts and stuff. And that is some kind of a problem that I would really like to target in this discussion, because in my opinion, we need some frameworks here, or some rule set to define how to interact with DAOs, really, if we want really to foster Web3 business models and digitization of governance structures in the real world as well. And that is something that I'm happy to, let's say, give into the discussion now.
I can offer another point of view again. In the context of LawFi DAO, which is the DAO that I've founded, we to assist with governance and incentives, because one of the purposes of LawFi DAO is to educate regulators and policymakers and the judiciary about, what is this collective of people that are trying to build autonomous technology. And we've started very purposefully within a legal framework with the templates provided by regulators to establish the rules of the DAO as an unincorporated association. But in the few months of existence, we're really only touching the surface of the various protocol options available to us and the relevant legal and tax structuring options that suit the protocol option. Has a decision to make about whether they want to release a various protocol from the get-go, or if they want all of the bells and whistles that include staking, increase to voting weight, revenue distributions, you name it. The more you add on, the more legal and tax complexity is introduced, and therefore registered with any one legal system, or even deemed as a legal entity in any one legal system, the more bells and whistles, the more likely the DAO is to find itself in regulated environments in one or more jurisdictions. But the words DAO, decentralized autonomous organization, that doesn't limit itself to applications built on blockchains. Otherwise it would be decentralized application organization. And so if you take the words in their broadest interpretation, I think that, and I'm not alone, Bitcoin, the Bitcoin protocol and the network could be the earliest example that we have of a DAO based on blockchain technology. And each blockchain that we've had since Bitcoin has made trade-offs, and not, for the sake of argument, lived up to the Bitcoin standard or the gold standard. So Bitcoin showed us that with the network of miners around the world, you can seek to have sufficient global decentralization so that there's protection against political censorship of the technology. And Ethereum came along, and this is where we had a crowd sale to raise money to build the rest of the blockchain technology and do community building. It moved away from token incentives by emission to raising capital, and now we're getting into securities law territory. So by looking at Bitcoin and the trade-offs made by all of the blockchains since, we get a chronology and a history of perhaps what a true DAO is, and now what the spectrum of DAOs are. And the exercise in front of us is to map exactly what is nuanced and most novel about this technology and the organizations and the functions that are possible with this autonomous technology that go beyond the existing legal and tax structures that we have, and identify where we do need to perhaps create new forms of recognition of entities or interactions with technology.
Yes, but so basically, I think just to like a little bit summarize things. So we are talking about spectrums here, from like communities that might not be online, but they are also like decentralized, to like decentralized but completely blockchain-based services. And then kind of on another axis could be like the legality of these, whether they are trying to be like only operating in the blockchain space, like focusing on their own like technology issues, towards like really more community building and services offering and interacting with the rest of the real world, let's put it this way. So in need for legal protections and the environment to be able to get access. And I think like this is what creates this like very unclear setup of like what a DAO is, because we haven't even talked about the autonomous part enough, because technically speaking, like if I would be really wanting to pushing it, autonomy means that human governance is followed by an autonomous execution. So like in a case of like a DAO, like every proposal should come with a piece of code that in case that like decision is voted by the community to pass, would automatically execute and make the changes to whatever the vote was about. This would be autonomous. Everything else, when we voted about changing the colors of our website to blue, and then we hire a designer to change it to blue, of course is what we voted about that, but then the decisions of what shade of blue was made after the vote. And so that's not autonomous, it's one person made a decision that it's gonna be that given blue. And so it's always like, again, the scale of decentralization and autonomy. And I think like what's really hard from a regulatory perspective, given the focus of the conference, is drawing lines into this like axis of where it becomes more like a legal entity and where it's just a community, where it's completely autonomous versus people making decisions, potentially acting like shareholders, and where legality and divides a community effort, let's put it this way, like where it acts more like some kind of a legal entity.
Yes, and I think that so far perhaps there might be a certain uncertainty in this room why DAOs are really that important given this ambiguity. I think that's exactly the strength, and I would like to pick up the thread a little bit of what has just been said, and to pick up also the theme of the discussion, which is a bit pompous. Why are DAOs the essential building block of the future economy? I mean, there's a certain preposterous idea behind this, but I fully subscribe to that. And let's go back 14 years. It's not a coincidence that the white paper of Bitcoin came at exactly the same moment that we had the insolvency of Lehman Brothers. And historically speaking, that is very clear why there has been this moment in time, because we had the crisis moment, one of the big crisis moments of a central system that is full of interdependent risks. And we had at the solution the nucleus of something new, which was Bitcoin, as has been said, starting point of a radical alternative. And then we have seen until now 14 years of compromise. We've seen 14 years where basically alternative finance, fintechs, blockchain, crypto have driven the traditional banking and finance system and have led it to some sort of innovation which we observe now. And now we are again at a crisis moment, but a much bigger crisis moment. The crisis moment that we face today is that what we have perceived as the order of the last 80 years is crumbling. We live in a situation that is full of geostrategic risks. We are living in a situation where basically a lot of things that we have taken as certain are not certain any longer. And we are looking for new ways of finding societal and collective organization. And this is what DAOs offer. DAOs give everyone the opportunity to interconnect in a self-autonomous, in a self-driven, in a bottom-up approach to find very different solutions to everyday problems. And indeed, there are two types of DAOs. There are those that are more intellectual, more in education, where people can interact in whatever form. In my opinion, as we've seen Bitcoin as the nucleus for a whole crypto world, the DAOs that are emerging now to a certain extent are the nucleus to new states, are the nucleus of new digital collectives that will take in the future some part, many of the functionalities that we are now associating with existing states, and that can maybe then also at a certain moment pop up everywhere in the real world. And then these discussions indeed of regulation, of the legal wrapper, of how that sort of, let's say, diplomatic relationships between a DAO and the business case become relevant. But that is not necessarily the typical case for all DAOs. And of course, we have seen two very good examples. The more you are in a concrete business model, take the example of Wyoming, where you have certain DAOs that then buy ground to found new cities, etc. When you do that, of course, you need to discuss the legal wrapper. Of course, you need to discuss what are sort of contractual structures, how that fits with existing regulation laws, etc. But you can also choose to have quite an increasing lot of activities completely in a digital manner without surfacing at some point in time. And if you surface, you can choose where you surface in the world. It's not only in 200 countries, it's also in certain regions like states in Wyoming, other parts of the world, etc. And that is truly fascinating. And this is the momentum that DAOs is building as someone that finally enables people to come together in a much more self-organized and self-controlled manner. And we are already, I think, quite advanced in Europe looking at governance models of existing DAOs, of voting mechanisms, of ways of how to incentivize that with tokens, etc. And this is a space that is typically unregulated. And that is probably indeed also the link to discussions like on MiCA that we had in the past. I mean, we should not forget that MiCA, and I agree, it's not primarily financial regulation, is something that has emerged only after a long time of studying the market, of engaging with everyone that is active in the space, and then at a certain stage when it has been relatively mature to come into regulation. And we are not absolutely there yet on DAOs. So it's very good that we have different models across the world, also in terms of regulation, of how these things will develop. I think we will see a boom of DAOs, as we have seen in the past with other crypto solutions. And there, I think we have to set a framework which is flexible enough to accommodate for that. But I see also from the examples that we hear, actually 3 examples of DAOs that are precisely doing that are already quite advanced in engaging with the real world. But this is not by default the natural case for DAOs in any circumstance.
Maybe.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. So, but therefore, it could be interesting to have some kind of a interface to really implement some kind of regulatory interfaces where DAOs can really in this certain manner. You have to follow these certain rules, and maybe then that is also a discussion point. Regulation comes more up into the technology, let's say technology driven style, that you, for instance, can say, hey, we have this and that rules to handle treasuries, we have this and that rules to handle liabilities, and please provide me with the smart contracts. And this smart contracts got certificate on this governance, and with these certificates, you are able to make with these smart contracts business in with our companies, let's say in this jurisdiction, for instance. It's just for the discussion, right?
All I'd say, I also agree with what the panelists are saying, but the further we kick legal frameworks to recognise DAOs and the activities that come from them and encouraging participatory governance, it is, and you know, people are genuinely scared about participating in voting when they otherwise would really like to be involved in making comments in Discord and in the social forums, being involved, but with the aggressive enforcement actions coming in the US, but also around the world, working towards that legal framework of legal recognition of DAOs and what you can do in them and around them safely, it sort of needs to run in step with the enforcement actions, because enforcement actions will give us legal precedent based on bad facts, which is not a holistic development of policy. And it's a fearful environment for good actors that will be looking over their shoulders as to whether they are actually a good actor with the decisions that they're making and the risk mitigation measures that they're adopting, noting that they can't fully comply with existing law in a lot of circumstances, or they have to comply with many countries' laws, which often is beyond the budget and treasury of a typical startup DAO. So just would encourage policymakers and industry advocates to really robust.
Can you repeat the end of your sentence? The internet connection is a little hard and just your point didn't came through.
Forgive me on the scratchy feed. Just to encourage robust discussion on legal frameworks for DAO participation.
Yes, I think like, I don't know for a fact, but I think like I might be on the panel the most involved with at least the highest number of DAOs to certain degrees, but I might be wrong. And it been surfacing. So recently there was a case in the US where one of the regulators served a DAO on their in their forums with a liability case against everyone who voted ever in that DAO. And I think that's what Joni was referring to, and that really came up in a lot of the servers and communities I'm involved, that what does this mean for that given community, that like, is it, yeah, it was legal, but more like, what can we do to mitigate the potential to not be served, or kind of like, no one really wants to be personally liable, and really a broad discussion started on like, we should like set up personal companies that is involved in the DAO. So it's not me personally, but like I have like an LLC that represents myself towards the DAO, or the DAO sets up an LLC that has some kind of like governance, like more formal framework. But of course, an LLC has a very understood structure that in a properly decentralized manner wouldn't be easy to meet with. Corporations, like there is a Swiss corporation legal framework that's probably the closest to what a DAO would be. But again, it's in Switzerland, and if a DAO is operating, trying to buy land in the US, that's like, very good luck buying. So like, it just brought up a lot of these legal questions. And of course, like there are some people who are lawyers, and then there are other people, the majority of DAO members, who have like very small understanding of how law works, specifically in crypto. So it's very interesting how like one such decision created an immense wave across the industry, at least in communities I'm involved, just because it's a precedent, and no one says it was a first one. It's probably going to happen. It was a clear case, like not. I don't want to put it this way. So that DAO Oki was very questionable from the get-go. Like, I think everyone who was involved like knew that, but it's still a precedent.
Completely agree. And I think that perhaps also looking at time, what is probably the way forward? There are many places in the world that now position themselves to attract DAOs. You mentioned the Swiss Foundation, you can take the German-Austrian Genossenschaften, you can take the limited liabilities companies in some US states or elsewhere, and that's good for developing the space in a specific way. Still, this goes too short, because at the end of the day, to approach the idea of a DAO through the lens of a contractual relationship with some regulatory space is already forfeiting a lot of the opportunities that a DAO can offer, and therefore there needs to be deeper ambition into that. And I can now only speak as someone who is advising policymakers and regulators on stuff like this, and also as an economist, that if you really want to understand the nature of the DAOs, the best thing that you can do as a takeaway is look into your libraries, look into a lot of the textbook literature of especially Anglo-American, neoclassical, monetarist, whatever, economics, and also other things that talk about the utility maximization of the individual, the profit maximization of the firm, and throw all of that away. There is an abundance of literature. Go back to Kant, go back to Hegel, go back to Fichte, go back to many other things in the philosophical domain that have been discussing this in a much better and much more profound way. And if we do not approach the question of DAOs when we want to develop the space really through understanding human incentives in interaction and the power of self-organization, that was actually the promise and still is of Bitcoin, and that has led to things like Monero and other things, taken the data space to have a lot of solutions actually that are fully proved but not located in the EU at this moment. Same thing will happen with DAOs, and that in my opinion is the true potential. So a DAO is a very heterogeneous thing indeed. It will resemble businesses that have been in existence. It should do so for many of the use cases, but the fundamental potential of DAOs lies much deeper in.
Anyone a quick closing remarks?
I totally agree, and I just want that, let's say, on my previous definition to distinguish the complete decentralized DAOs and the legal compliant DAOs, which are more digitized governance structures. So to really have a deeper understanding of it, and to provide more sophisticated frameworks to really pay attention to the decentralized character of this kind of DAOs, opens up new kind of businesses, opens up new types of interaction and stuff like this, and really fostering Web3 business models in the economies. And this is not, let's say, to provide this framework for all DAOs. It is just like more maybe an interface approach, that this kind of DAOs that would like to apply to this kind of rules, they can do it, because today in the practice that I know very much, DAOs and companies, they are looking into the space and they experience really much uncertainty and no really framework, and no one knows what to do, how to handle the treasury, how to handle liabilities and claims against DAOs and stuff like this. And if we can offer a framework for this kind of really DAOs and certain businesses, that would be really interesting for at least many people I personally know and are involved in different DAOs. And that would be great. And I think the key to it is really education, and really from the policymakers and from other institutionals to really look into the space and try to understand what are really DAOs are really stand for, and then to, let's say,
and therefore worth understanding. Apologies for the scratchy feed.
We didn't get you. You were almost muted.
Maybe you can repeat?
Yes.
Just that decentralization is the policy goal worth protecting.
That's true. And as a last remark, and we are out of time, I would love to ask everyone in the room, especially regulators, to join a DAO and have an experience about online-driven community building and the hurdles and benefits of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to our panelists, and please join me for a special thanks for both Manuel and Joni for joining us online, considering the time zone differences, other issues, the connectivity issues that are obviously still part of our world. But that was a great discussion advancing this idea of how a DAO should actually be regulated.